This is not OEM. Another indicator that somebody's been in here. This is interesting. This is where things catch fire, wires melt. And then I have this nuclear missile launch looking switch. This front fender is all smashed up. It's all fixable. It's all fixable. All right guys, different kind of video today. So it's, I guess for posterity, it's April 16th, 2022. I have another project, and as I started opening up this project and kind of giving it a once-over, I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about buying an old used ATV, what to look for, warning signs, identifying where there might be value. Especially since COVID, the value of used ATVs has really gone up. Project ATVs has really gone up. So yeah, let's take a look. So I have a Yamaha Big Bear now. So here we are. This is a 1990 or so. I haven't actually checked the year. Big Bear 350 4x4. This was Yamaha's first 4x4 ATV. They made these from, I think it was 87 to 98. I think you can also find a 99 production year. And then it became the, I think it was the Bear Tracker in year 2000. That was a 400cc 4x4. Not the first four-wheel drive ATV. I think that honor goes to the Honda 4Trax. So this popped up on Marketplace and went down to take a look at it. And now that I've pressure washed it and I have taken the bolts off the plastic, put it back together so I can walk through. Now that I've seen a number of things that really are good things to point out if you're looking to get a used ATV and take on the restoration. So first thing right off the bat, walking up to it, the seat covered in duct tape. This is one that really kind of bugs me for a few reasons. You know, there's $10 in duct tape on this seat, and any of you that have worked on old ATVs, you know that a seat cover is $30. The other thing on this seat is to get the tape wrapped around, get all this grip. They got rid of $50 worth of latch hardware, which is really a pain. It's difficult to find. Finding latch hardware on eBay, difficult, even OEM stock hard. Really, to get this seat fixed up, I would recommend hop on Facebook Marketplace, and join some groups related to the Big Bear or the Moto 4s or Yamahas and find someone that's parting out. Another piece on this one, looking for the seat latches, they're still here. This one's kind of snapped off, but it'll work. Couple of bump stop, rubber bump stops missing. But watch for these seat clips, because if you are going to try and repair the seat, you're going to need those to be able to latch in down on the front. And in this case, I guess they go underneath the tank. Here's what it looks like. Set this out of the way. So other things, walking around it. When I showed up, there was no battery on this one. So this is my battery that I've put in. So you couldn't hear the motor start. So a couple of things I do. I often bring a screwdriver so I can jump at the solenoid if there's a battery in there, or a jump box. Again, if there's a battery and it's a dead battery, put the jump box on the battery, hear it crank, see if there's any resistance on the motor. The other option, if there's no battery, can't jump the solenoid, take your jump box and come around to the starter side. And on the starter, underneath here, there is your positive post. Put your jump box positive there and your negative just ground it out to a good spot on the frame. And that should crank the motor, and you'll be able to hear it crank, hear if there's any resistance. So at least if you can hear it crank, you don't have a blown up transmission or anything locked up in the bottom end. So good thing to do there. Other thing, walking up to it, I've seen the coil. This is not OEM. This is a $8 aftermarket. Lots of problems with these. So there's a warning here. Somebody's done some work and they haven't gone OEM. So there could be some cheap work in here. Looking to the left, look at the carb. I like to see the original Mikuni carbs wherever I can. Rebuilding an original carb has worked out better for me than doing an aftermarket. Trouble with the aftermarket carbs, the jet sizing, the quality and the jet sizing, it could be way off. So with some experience, you can tune in aftermarket carbs, these cheap carbs. You can find it frustrating if it's not something you're used to doing. And in this case, there's no Mikuni stamp on here. If I look closely, this is a Zoom name brand, whatever that is. Another thing to point out, now again, I said I've taken off the plastics and set it back on for the purposes of this, but if you see switches and it's not obvious what the switches go to, a winch switch, controls will be up on the handlebar, they'll be obvious. Here, this switch was wired in up here. I have the key still down here. And then I have this nuclear missile launch looking switch wired in on this side. Indicative somebody's been into the electric. You're gonna wanna look closer. I can also see I've got this brown wire here, which another indicator that somebody's been in here. Factory wiring, it's in the loom. Everything's into the wiring harness. So just having a loose wire trailing down the chassis implies somebody has been doing something. So following this wire back, tough to see here. Somebody's wired that right to the solenoid, which indicates somebody made the choice to bypass the starter switch. Don't know why. Check the fuses. So in this case, pop the fuse open, and here's a warning sign right here. Someone has wrapped the fuse in aluminum foil. This is interesting. That's exactly what they did. Bypass a blown fuse, 30 amp fuse in this case. Something's going on in the electrical here. This is, if you're testing, I can accept this, but if you're riding and you're bypassing safety features like an inline fuse, this is where things catch fire, wires melt. This is not a good situation. Check the fuse. Also, while I'm down here, I'm noticing some other things. There's an oil cooler on here. I've got a hose clamp to nowhere. Why? Also plastics. Plastics are huge. Replacing old plastics, very challenging, very expensive to ship. So in this case, I see some original decals. They're not painted. So if you take some time here, hop on a couple Google videos, you can really bring plastics back. In this case, something happened to a front fender. This front fender is all smashed up. It's on an angle. This is going to be a tough one to replace. Looking at it, I see residue from some epoxy. So somebody made an attempt here. And we'll go through and fix this up as well. You can do things like plastic welding. I even use some crazy glue sometimes if I can set it right. Plastic welder puts kind of little metal tabs in to reinforce. Another good one to call out before you go down, hop on Google and look up the manufacturer specs on the ATV. Get an idea what the ATV looked like when it came off the showroom floor. Gives you an idea of what to expect in terms of are parts missing or did parts come with it. Most of these Yamaha Big Bears, they came with a front luggage rack. That luggage rack is missing on this one. eBay, easy part to find, fortunately, but it's $100. Winches. Sometimes people remove the winch before they sell it, or you'll go look at it and a winch has been added. And if it's been added, there's a little bit of value there. Something else to recognize. Oh, exhaust. Let me put the camera down for a moment. I'm going to lift the plastics off, show you a few more things here. All right, just lifted the plastics off. We're going to take a deeper look here now that we can see everything. Kind of tough. You can spend the time when you're on site looking at ATV, but something old and blown up like this, you know you're getting into some challenges. As soon as I lifted off the plastics, I can see a couple of things immediately. I'm going to come around to the top end here. This concerns me. This is a head bolt, and somebody's done some RVT around the head bolt. Shouldn't need to do this. Okay, so there is, hard to see, but there is the copper crush washer. And on this one, looks like they've done the crush washer on both sides. Did they strip the bolt out, not do a helicoil? Just, there's no reason for doing something like this. It implies, oh boy, I'm gonna wanna check compression. That's an interesting move. Check oil, obviously here. Let's make sure there's something. And it's overfilled would be my take on that one. I didn't clean the dipstick, but lots of oil. On these Yamaha Big Bears, look for this this cowling that covers the front U-joint. Often this is missing, and folks complain that when this is missing, the front end really takes kind of a beating and you're replacing U-joints. That came from just searching on Google, looking informed, people talking about maintaining these units. So it's just a question of getting educated before you head out to take a look. More zip ties hanging. Something else interesting here. They've done, I'm going to guess, underneath this wire, they've stuck it through the eyelet, twisted it, done some electrical tape. Implies this might not even be the right coil for this. So I'm going to need to take a look. Here's the key. key mechanism, it's been cut. So 2 of the wires, going to need a service manual, look at the wiring diagram, understand what's been cut here, and then they spliced into the main harness this switch. This switch runs back into the harness. It's a 3-way toggle switch, runs forward. Here we go, headlights. They cut and spliced the headlights. Here's the original headlight harness, just clean cut, spliced it in. You can see it's already fallen apart here and ran it back. So my guess here is that this is off low beam and high beam headlights, bypassing the handlebar. Some of these don't have factory tape on them, so what were they doing? I've got a loose wire hanging here. A brown, hence back into the loom to see where that goes. Also poking around, here's the CDI, zip tied to the steering stem. Should have been bolted here, so at some point somebody cut the bolts off the CDI, zip tied in. This also doesn't look OEM to me. A little tough to tell, that could be a knockoff, but one of the indicators that it's not OEM is I see different quality wiring work here. Somebody took the time to join these together and shrink wrap them. And again here, and again here. They've mapped through, so you do this to preserve the connectors. Just map the wires, use the Yamaha connectors. Makes me think that there were probably more than one owner on this quad. So first thought, yeah, there was another owner who was a little more conscientious with the wiring. And then as I start looking at all the electrical tape and twisted wire splices together, one of the owners really just is trying to keep it on the trail. But wrapping an electrical tape, you'll run for a while, but I'll tell you, for the 50 cents that you'll spend in some shrink wrap tubing or some heat shrink solder joints, if you don't have a solder gun, you can get yourself left on the trail real easy with just wrapping wires and electrical tape, and then you're in the mud, it's dirty, you'll never find it, and as soon as you have to hike out of the woods once for something like that, yeah. I do see some current work on here. I'm gonna say these CV boots have been replaced. Those certainly aren't stock. There's a little bit of pitting, there's a little bit of cracking. These aren't too ancient, and I see new cotter pins. So somebody's been into the ball joints, perhaps bearings, both sides. Torque control diff. This is interesting. So on this unit, as I mentioned, Yamaha's first 4-wheel drive. This is an always-on 4-wheel drive. It's not selectable. You don't have a 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive option. You're always running 4-wheel drive. Also of interest, hydraulics and their drums. These aren't rotors. These are drum hydraulics. One thing I look for in photos is I look for, see if I can zoom in on the handlebars to see if I can see hydraulics anywhere on the unit. I ride a lot of units that have the old cable pull brakes, and tuned in appropriately, they run great until you get into deep mud, sediment, and at that point you just have massive brake fade, and really it's tough to clean them out. You got to open them up. And I've had plenty of times riding, suddenly you've gone through the mud, you go to stop and you're coasting right into the ATV in front of you. So if you're used to riding ATVs, okay, but if you're going to put the kids on one, or somebody with less experience, look for at least one set of hydraulic brakes. The dead giveaway is up here on the handlebar, so we have hydraulics. In this case, the front are going to be hydraulics. The rear is your classic cable pull drum. They always need adjustment. Exhaust is huge, especially on the old ATVs, in particular the Moto 4s, the 350s, these models. These exhausts, hard to find. Aftermarket's hard to find really what exhaust is out there for the aftermarket. I have put a few of them on, but they've been such a open flow pipe, they're just loud and really make the bike run lean unless you go and start adjusting the carburetor. So poke around the exhaust, make sure it's solid. This is a great candidate to pull off, sand down a little bit, hit it with a new enamel. Looking up around the joint here, looks good to me, or good enough, I guess I should say. If you're able to lift the rear end at all, see if there's any play behind here in the swing arm bushings. Often it's as easy as just seeing if everything is tight when you lift. This one's tight. Another thing, see if the shock is blown out. Compress the rear, see if there's any rebound dampening or if you're just riding a pogo stick. So on this one, just ready for the rebound. Oh my goodness. See, when I take my hand off, there's rebound. It's not bouncing. There's still life left in that shock. Happy there. Of course, diff, if you bring some Allen wrenches, open up, see what that looks like in there. Should be full right to the top. You can push and roll it back and forth. See if you hear any clinking, grinding noise. Another area to check, a little tough unless you can get the rear end up, but would be to get it up, shake the rear wheels, feel for bearing play or worn out carrier bearings. Those would be a pain to replace. Looking at the back, regulator, relays. This harness all looks original. That's encouraging. Coming around here, I can see this wire better now. This one, chasing it all the way back. All the way back. Yep, this one's run to this nuke switch, which is interesting because this is probably actually the starter switch, and doing this would crank the motor. And you just crank unless you remember to flip that off. I've done stuff like this on old Tao Taos. It's less than ideal. Someone forgets and they just leave this on cranking. Not ideal. I'm gonna have to get under here. There's wiring holding on the console. Why is that necessary? This piece here should just be a press on. And then back here again, 2 generations of wiring. All the electrical tape, splices, another cut that runs back into the CDI. What would you cut that's blue and white? It would have been in your CDI, runs back into the main loom. This is going to be, I think, the meat of this build here is going to be figuring out and straightening out the electrical. My eye just caught something else here. I have pulled the screws off the airbox. There's always check the airbox. I've never opened an airbox and seen it in good condition on an old rebuildable quad. Oh yeah. Mice have been eating. And this is interesting. They've jammed a hose. I put this over there tonight when I pulled off the plastics. To fit this in, instead of using a hose clamp, they've jammed some, I don't know, car radiator hose in here. You're going to get different airflow coming through there, which is going to change your jetting. A little goofy. No hose clamp there. And on this carb, we have a screw in one of the hoses. I'm going to have to look at the carb to understand what this is or what this is for. This is a breather hose. This is not a good situation. What is this tape here? So this is a wire that runs, this is the negative that runs to the solenoid. Little interesting, why is that taped? Runs across. Have to chase that one down. I'm also intrigued by this. Why all this electrical tape on a cable for a carb? This looks like it's been replaced, throttle cable. It's not all rusted out, but somebody's taken the time to wrap a lot of electrical tape and then run it in. It's screwed all the way down and all the way down up here, which is interesting because they've made no adjustment at all to throttle play. Interesting. Usually there's some adjustment in here because you take some tension off depending on the length of the cable. I've never seen that it's all flattened out and there's no play in here. It does sound like it's dropping all the way. Okay. Anything else stand out to me? This came off the plastics. Tires, usually, I'll take my my jump box has some capability for pumping tires. I like to see if they all hold air, check for dry rot. A little bit of dry rot in here, rideable for a while. Helps to know as well, manufacturer original size tires, 25. So these are original size. So there's nothing aftermarket here. I am missing a nut. And I can see someone's been in here. There's a replacement cotter pin. So somebody's done either brake work, bearing work, something in front. Oh, oh, I don't like to see this. The boot. Oh, I don't like seeing boots off. Oof. And this boot seems pretty big. Oh, and they were riding like this. Look at all that sludge down in there. Don't like to see that. We'll need to address that some way, shape, or form. Find out if this is the right size or not. Oh man. It's got good rubber feel to it. It's not original. I'm not convinced it's the right size. Yeah, so I said it wasn't Mikuni. Top's Mikuni. Bottom Zoom. Mix and match carb. I don't see a bent steering column. Yeah, so that's it. So this one's gonna be something special. There's a lot in here. So now, and that's why this one was a great example. There was just a lot of things to show. Shocks, make sure they have rebound, dampening. They went all through the electrical on here. There's been some engine work with some RVT. They've put cheap knockoff parts on here like that coil. They've done a real bang up job splicing electrical, doing their bypasses. It's all fixable. It's all fixable. So what's my next move here? So having pulled off the plastics, the rear plastics over here. Rear plastics are in nice condition. We'll get these pieces off. We'll get them through the parts washer or the parts agitator, clean them up, hit them with some paint, easy. We'll do some plastic restoration here. The rear, no cracks. Really not bad condition. Just gonna be some time if I'm gonna swap out these bolts or leave them. The front's a little rougher. Got some cracks on this side here on the fender, and then down here this fairing. And again, somebody did put a little bit of time into trying to repair this. Just wasn't successful. Have to do some work on the headlights. There's some work on the seat. Rear racks, and it's in good condition. You can put a coat of paint on there and you'll be fine. My next move is to pressure wash it again. Going through all this electric, I want to be able to see the colors on the wires, easily find all the ends of the wires. So I have pressure washed it once with the plastics on. I'm going to do it again. I want to get all this cleaned up so I can see, because we got stuff to drill out. We got a lot of wire in the chase. Open up this here. And what we're going to end up doing, now that we have a power source, we're going to start working backwards. Jump the solenoid. Does that make it crank? Yes, no. Fuse. We'll get a new fuse in here. We'll find out if it pops the fuse right away. We'll keep working up towards probably seeing if we can get this switch to crank. Once we get it crank, we'll start backing some of this stuff off. Some of it's going to be easy enough. Just wiring the lights back, cut, resplice. Don't know if we have a functional CDI. Once we get the crank, we'll check for spark. We're going to get our hands on a manual or a free electrical diagram schematic. And once we get to start and idle, we'll start working through some of the other challenges. The boot here, we'll address some of this filter, get this all right. Haven't even opened up the carb. But yeah, that's it. That's the next project. So hopefully that is helpful. Those are things that I look for when I'm looking at a used quad. I couldn't make a good guess on what I'm gonna have to put into this one. When I roll up and I see, a garage, there's bulldozers and backhoes, jet skis, probably a boat, maybe a few snowmobiles, 3 or 4 parts quads, you gotta look in there, because somebody's been doing some work and they're selling one of them. Why? What couldn't they solve on the one that they're selling when they've got 10 or 12 or 15 other vehicles dispersed around the property? Something to think about.